The Survivor. Lost in the Woods, a survival tale. I didn't plan to lose myself out here. Not literally. That wasn't the point. Point was to get away from the crowded silence of my empty house, from the pitying glances of neighbours who thought they knew me, and from the memories that clung to the walls like shadows that wouldn't let me breathe. Raven's Hollow Wilderness Loop was supposed to be my escape, a place where the noise in my head could drown beneath the rustle of leaves and the crunch of boots on dirt. Told myself I was prepared. This wasn't my first hike, and the solitude felt necessary as I stood at the trailhead, staring into the shadowed depths of the forest, hesitated for just a moment. I should have listened to that instinct. The trail was steeper than I'd anticipated. The midday sun, casting long, slanting shadows, played tricks on my eyes. Sweat dripped down my back as I pushed harder, faster, anything to keep moving. Then it happened. The rock shifted beneath my boot, slick with moss I hadn't noticed. My arms flailed instinctively, grasping at nothing, and the world tilted. A sharp crack echoed through my skull, and everything went black. A flashback in darkness. "Are you really going to wear that shirt?" Claire's voice, teasing and warm, filtered through the haze. "It's a hike, not a fashion show." Sunlight spilling through the kitchen window lit her auburn hair like fire. She was holding a map, finger tracing a winding line across the paper. "Raven's Hollow?" I had asked, feigning scepticism. "Isn't that a bit ambitious for someone who gets winded climbing stairs?" She'd laughed, a sound I'd give anything to hear again. Swatted me with the map. The memory splintered. Now it was raining. No, snowing. I couldn't tell. She was still smiling, but there was something wrong with her eyes. Something vacant. "Claire?" My voice cracked. "Claire!" Back to reality. The darkness was absolute when I opened my eyes. For a moment I didn't know where I was, or why my head throbbed with every heartbeat. The ground beneath me was damp, and the earthy scent of moss and spine needles filled my nose. I sat up too quickly, the world spinning as nausea rolled over me. How long had I been out? Hours? Days? Sticky warmth traced the line from my temple to my jaw, touched it gingerly and felt the unmistakable tackiness of blood. Panic gnawed at the edges of my mind, but I shoved it down. Breathe, assess. That's what you're supposed to do, right? My pack. Where was my pack? I felt around blindly until my fingers brushed nylon. Relief flooded through me. At least I still had the essentials. But the darkness was closing in, whispering 1,000 doubts. I was alone. I was injured. And I had no idea where the trail was. The wilderness's grip. The forest felt alive in the dark. Every sound was amplified. The rustle of leaves overhead, the snap of a distant branch, the low hum of insects circling too close. I tried to stand but stumbled, my legs shaky beneath me. The nausea returned with a vengeance, and I braced myself against the rough bark of a tree. "Think, damn it," I muttered, my voice breaking the stillness. Had to get my bearings. The flashlight. I fumbled for my pack, fingers clumsy against the zippers, until I found it. The beam sliced through the darkness, illuminating towering trunks and a tangle of undergrowth. But the trail was gone, swallowed by shadows of my own carelessness. I leaned against a tree and closed my eyes, willing the spinning to stop. The memory of Claire's face flickered behind my eyelids, a teasing smile softening into something more serious. "You're going too fast," she said once, hand resting lightly on my arm. You miss everything worth seeing. The irony wasn't lost on me. I wasn't just lost in the woods. I was lost in everything. Panic and problem solving. The flashlight beam dimmed slightly and my chest tightened. I couldn't afford to panic. Not yet. Forced myself to inventory what I had. Half-full water bottle, granola bar, a map I hadn't bothered to check before I'd wandered off the main trail, and a knife. The essentials. Barely. The light caught something ahead. Patch of earth disturbed. Rocks scattered. Spot where I'd fallen. I crouched to examine the area. Blood marked the ground where my head had struck. Dark and already drying. The sight sent a fresh wave of nausea through me, but I pushed it aside. The trees loomed closer here, their branches interlocking like a cage. I scattered the ground for the trail, but it was no use. My sense of direction had been scrambled along with my skull. "Stay put," I said aloud, as if hearing the words would make them easier to follow. I found a spot nearby, where the ground sloped slightly upward. Small clearing, just wide enough to give me a view of the sky. Stars winked down at me, indifferent to my predicament. Shelter. I needed shelter. Building hope. The task was simple enough. Gather branches, arrange them to something resembling a lean-to, hope it would hold through the night. But my hands shook as I worked. My head throbbed with every movement. Still, there was something grounding about it. Scrape of wood against bark, smell of pine sap sticking to my fingers. It was a reminder that I was here, alive, capable of more than the fear threatening to overtake me. By the time the shelter was done, it was crude but functional. I crawled inside and let out a long breath. The ache in my head finally dulling. But the silence brought its own torment. The flashback to Claire's face, her laughter, her absence, all surged back in the quiet. My chest tightened, and for the first time, I let myself admit it. I wasn't just lost in the woods. I was lost without her. The wilderness's grip tightens. Morning came slowly, the weak light of dawn filtering through the canopy. Hadn't slept much. Damp ground pressing into my back, my head pounding with every heartbeat. Granola bar tasted like cardboard as I forced it down. I sipped sparingly from the water bottle, cool liquid doing little to soothe the dryness in my throat. I had maybe half a day's worth left, and the ache in my head warned me I'd need every drop. It was time to move. Staying put had seemed smart in the dark, but now, fear of dehydration, or worse, drove me to my feet. I strapped on my pack, tucked the map into my pocket, and scanned the forest for any sign of the trail. Nothing. Thirst and shadows. The sun climbed higher, its rays piercing through gaps in the trees and searing against my skin. My water bottle felt lighter with every sip, each swallow followed by guilt. I needed to find a stream or any sign of water, but the forest seemed endless, its sounds growing louder the longer I walked. A rustle in the undergrowth stopped me cold. I froze, scanning the area. My eyes caught movement. Flash of dark scales slithering across the ground. Snake. The creature glided away, indifferent, but my pulse thundered in my ears. Couldn't afford a misstep. Not now. Every noise became suspect. Every shadow a threat. Dehydration sets in. By mid-afternoon, the water was gone. My legs felt heavier with each step. My mouth was dry, my vision blurring at the edges. Stumbled into a clearing and collapsed against a fallen log. The heat pressed down on me like a weight. My head spun as if the earth itself had tilted. "Keep moving," I muttered, my voice a rasp. But I couldn't, not yet. Claire's voice whispered in my mind. "Pace yourself. You don't have to do everything at once." She was always the calm one, voice of reason when I'd let my temper or pride get the better of me. My throat tightened at the thought of her, the ache of missing her sharper than the pain in my body. The first encounter. Clearing seemed to shimmer, the edges of my vision wavering like heat rising from asphalt. Then I saw her. Figure stepped out from the trees. A young woman. Her dark hair pulled into a loose braid, her expression calm but curious. She wore a well-worn pack, a water bottle dangling from one side, a confident air that seemed out of place here. "You look like hell," she said, a lopsided grin breaking the tension. I blinked, half convinced I was hallucinating. "Ooh," my voice cracked and I coughed. She crouched beside me, her movements easy, unhurried. "Take this," she said, offering a water bottle. I hesitated, but thirst won. The water was cool, refreshing, tasted real enough. "Thanks," I managed, my voice hoarse. "Don't mention it," she said, her grin softening into something warmer. "You look like you could use the help." Her words were casual, but there was something in her eyes, something knowing, like she could see straight through me. Subtle bonding. We sat in silence for a moment, her presence strangely grounding. "Got a name?" she asked, breaking the quiet. "Daniel," I said. "Nice to meet you, Daniel. I'm Mia." She leaned back, her gaze sweeping the clearing. "What brings you out here? Besides, nearly dying." Corner of her mouth twitched, despite myself. Needed some time alone. She didn't press, but there was a spark of recognition in her expression, like she understood more than I was saying. Collaboration in the wild. Mia was a paradox. She moved through the forest like she belonged there, a step sure and deliberate, while I stumbled over roots and second-guessed every decision. She talked as if we'd known each other for years, her voice light and easy, filling the silence I hadn't realised was suffocating me. "So what's your plan, Daniel?" she asked, turning back to look at me. "Find water, find the trail." My answer was curt, my throat still raw from thirst. "Solid plan," he said with a nod, then added with a smirk. "But maybe we skip the snakes this time, huh?" I couldn't help it. A laugh escaped before I could stop it. It felt foreign. My chest wasn't sure how to handle the sound. A moment of relief. She led us to a small stream not far from where she'd found me. Sight of the clear running water sent a wave of relief through me. Dropped to my knees, cupping my hands to drink, letting the cool liquid wash away the dryness in my mouth and the edge of my fear. "Don't forget to refill," she said, tossing me a spare bottle from her pack. I caught it, eyeing her carefully. "You seem prepared." "I like to be ready for anything," she said with a shrug. "Besides, you never know who you'll run into out here. Some guy with a head injury, for example." Her grin was infectious. For the first time since I'd woken up in the dark, the weight on my chest felt a little lighter. Hints of the uncanny. As we moved through the forest, Mia's instincts were uncanny. She seemed to know exactly where to go, her eyes scanning the trees with a confidence I envied. "Have you been out here before?" I asked, struggling to keep up. "Not exactly," she said, her tone playful but vague. "I just have a knack for finding my way." Her answers were always like that, just enough to satisfy the question without giving away anything real. Moments of connection. The day wore on, the sun dipping lower as we navigated through the dense forest. Mia kept the mood light, throwing out jokes and stories that were equal parts ridiculous and endearing. "Did you hear about the guy who tried to out-hike a bear?" she asked as we stopped to rest. "No." "He lost, obviously. At least he got in some cardio. I groaned. Oh, the corner of my mouth twitched. That's terrible. You're welcome, she said, taking a bite of an energy bar. In quieter moments, though, her tone shifted. She asked about my life. Careful questions. Nothing too intrusive. So, she said after a long pause, this alone time thing, is it working? I didn't answer right away, my gaze fixed on the horizon. It's complicated. Most things worth doing are, she said simply. The turning point. By the time night fell, the forest felt like a different place. Sounds of birds had faded, replaced by the distant cries of unseen creatures. We should stop for the night, Mia said, scanning the area. This spot'll work. I helped gather branches for a fire, though my hands felt clumsy compared to her precision. As the flames crackled, glow dancing on the trees around us, Mia leaned back against her pack, her expression thoughtful. You're stronger than you think, you know, she said, her voice softer now. I glanced at her, caught off guard. What makes you say that? She shrugged, small smile tugging at her lips. Just a feeling. Disappearance in the dark. When I woke the next morning, the fire was out, the ashes cold. I sat up, groggy, expecting to see Mia nearby. But the clearing was empty. Mia! I called, my voice hoarse. No answer. Searched the area, my chest tightening as I realised there was no trace of her. No pack, no footprints, nothing to suggest she'd been here at all. Didn't make sense. Couldn't have left without waking me. Not without leaving some sign. Panic clawed at the edges of my mind. Had I imagined her? But then I saw it, her water bottle, left beside the fire pit. Small, undeniable piece of evidence that she had been here. Or had she? The final struggle. The morning air felt colder without Mia's easy chatter to fill the space. I stood there for a long time, staring at the spots where she'd sat the night before, trying to make sense of it. Forest around me was silent, stillness unnerving. Her water bottle rested against the charred remains of the fire. Picked it up, turning it over in my hands. It was real, solid and cool against my skin. Proof that she hadn't just been a fever dream. But where had she gone? And why hadn't she waited? Questions buzzed in my mind, mingling with the growing dread. I couldn't afford to stand still. I had to move. Desperation sets in. The day dragged on, each step feeling heavier than the last. My head still throbbed, dehydration gnawing at the edges of my strength. The forest seemed to stretch endlessly, the trees blurring together into an oppressive wall of green. Mia's absence was like a void, and with it came doubt. Had she been real? A ghost? My imagination clawing for companionship? Or had I finally lost my grip? I tripped over a root, sprawling face first into the dirt. Pain lanced across my knees. But it was nothing compared to the exhaustion threatening to drag me under. I pressed my forehead against the cool earth, my breath shallow. I can't do this, I whispered. But then her voice echoed in my mind. You're stronger than you think. Fingers curled into the soil, forced myself upright, one trembling limb at a time. If Mia had taught me anything, it was that I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. The rescue. It was near dusk when I heard it, a faint mechanical hum cutting through the quiet. Staggered toward the sound, the adrenaline pushing me forward. Hum grew louder, resolving into voices and the unmistakable thud of helicopter blades. A search party. Stumbled into the clearing, my body sagging with relief as shouts erupted. Arms caught me before I hit the ground. The next moments blurred into chaos. Questions, voices, water pressed to my lips. As I was helped onto the helicopter, my gaze drifted back toward the forest. Trees loomed in the fading light, and for a moment I thought I saw her, figure standing just beyond the clearing, watching, but when I blinked, she was gone. Reflection and mystery. Back in the safety of civilization, the weight of the experience finally settled on me. My injuries healed, but the questions remained. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the water bottle she'd left behind. Logo was faded, cap slightly worn. Ordinary, tangible, and yet felt like the only proof I'd had that she'd been real. Or had she? I thought about her laugh, her confidence, the ways she seemed to know things about me without my saying a word. Presence had felt so solid, so grounding, but the forest played tricks on people. The mind played tricks too. I ran my fingers over the bottle's surface, chest tightening. Was she a ghost? Manifestation of my own strength? Or something else entirely? I didn't have the answers. Maybe I never would. One thing was certain. Mia had saved me in more ways than one. Conclusion. The memory of the forest lingered long after the bruises faded. It wasn't just the place where I'd gotten lost. It was a place where I'd started to find myself again. I still didn't know who or what Mia had been. As I stood at the edge of my backyard, staring at the tree line, I felt a strange sense of peace. "Thank you," I whispered to the woods, to her, to whatever force had guided me home. The forest didn't answer, but I didn't need it to.